A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's right, folks. From the mountains of Kentucky to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama, this is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator, Adam Keller. Today, we are talking about the unlikely history of interracial unionism in Alabama's coal mines over the last century. We are also going to be breaking down the latest in the child labor legislation in the state of Alabama, taking a look at the South Carolina governor's attacks on unions and labor's response, as well as bringing you what we do every week, Last Week in Southern Labor and Boss Watch. All that and more on today's program. If you want to be part of the show today, we've got a phone number, 844-899-TVLR is that number. You can call and contribute to the program while we are on the air, or you can leave us a voicemail and we might answer it on the next program. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us anywhere you find anything online. If you want to get Boss Watch and Last Week in Southern Labor as a newsletter, then you can sign up on our website, TVLR.fm. You can also find us on Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok, and wherever you get your podcasts, all at the Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners. So if you want to make a one-time or recurring monthly contribution, you can go to tvlr.fm/donate or patreon.com/the Valley Labor Report. We also have a merch store at tvlr.fm/store where we have a few shirts left over. You're going to want to get those before they run out. We only have like 6 or 7 left. And our hats, folks. Pre-orders for the TVLR logo cap are back up. If you make a pre-order in the next 2 weeks, we can guarantee you a hat by the middle of April. And if you're going to be at the Labor Notes Conference, we can bring it to you there. That's why we wanted to do the pre-orders right now. We wanted to have some more logo caps for Labor Notes so that we can sell our wares over there. So again, tvlr.fm/store if you want to buy our logo caps, $35 plus shipping. And if you're a member of a union, please do think about getting your local to sponsor the show. We could not do this without the support of our union sponsors.
Yeah, that's right. We really, really appreciate them and all the support that we've received. Some, including like iron workers, have been supporters of this program from the very beginning, and we really appreciate that. Let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, Unclaimed Mysteries Internet Radio, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WMMT, or through your favorite podcast app. We are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check that out. And just wanted to point out a couple of things since we have some new listeners today, I know. And, we are not media professionals, if you haven't figured that out yet. Just some diehard union brothers who really believe that we need to put Alabama and the South's labor movement on the map. Working class people deserve a bigger platform. Hoping this project can make a difference on that front. So we really appreciate everyone who tunes in, whether you're a loyal fan coming back to us or you're a first-time listener. Appreciate that. Appreciate your time. We air live on WVNN, which is the right-wing talk radio station in Huntsville, Athens. every Saturday from 9:30 to 11, with our overtime after 11 airing online on YouTube and Facebook, and now on WMMT as well. We got our start on WVNN, which is also the birthplace of Sean Hannity and home to all sorts of reactionary propaganda that we find personally objectionable. But we do think it's important to get a different perspective out there to multiple audiences. We're happy that a portion of the show is replayed during the week on WZZA, which is a historic black radio station in Northwest Alabama, and of course on WHIV, a community radio station in New Orleans. And as I mentioned, newly on WMMT up in Whitesburg, Kentucky. The full episode comes out on Spotify, Apple, your various podcasting apps. Definitely subscribe to us on your app of choice. Give us a good review. And throughout the week, clips of the show are released as standalone videos on YouTube and sometimes TikTok as well. So if there's a specific segment or interview that you want to find, we do try to make that easy for you. Just do us a favor, hit subscribe, hit like. All of our content is free, so special thanks to all of you who donate, all of you who comment and call in, and all of you who like us, share us, review us, subscribe, do all that good stuff. That engagement on social media and the various apps really does help. It helps get the word out, it helps boost the audience, and it's really an easy, free way to support the program, even if you don't have any change to contribute. But if you believe it's important to have our own media of, by, and for Southern working class folks, definitely consider supporting us however you can. And if you can't contribute financially, please do share with your coworkers, your friends, your family, your neighbors, anybody you know who might be interested in what we have to say and what we talk about on this program and the amazing guests that we have every week. We know there's a lot of good causes to support. We know y'all are working class folks with limited incomes. So those of you who do contribute to the project, it really does mean a lot to us. We appreciate it. We've got a lot of good stuff planned. Can't do it without you.
Yeah, that's right. And we really do have some amazing guests. I mean, where else are you going to hear an interview about black and white coal miners organizing together in the 1880s Alabama? I mean, there's not a whole lot of places for that conversation to happen, so
yeah,
we're really happy to have it here.
Later this morning to talk with someone from the Department of Professional Employees about white-collar unionization, right,
Yep.
and why unions are good for white-collar office workers. Again, not a conversation you're going to hear in Alabama's media.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and get to last week in Southern labor. Here is what workers in the U.S. South and the American colonies were up to from February 16th to the 23rd. In new union campaigns, a supermajority of journalists at the San Antonio Express News are requesting voluntary recognition for their unionization with the San Antonio News Guild. The employer filed for a union election after a majority of the 17 workers at Packer Transport in Clinton, Tennessee, filed a petition to hold a union election with probably the Teamsters, since the employees are school bus drivers and the Teamsters have been on a roll organizing those types of workers, but the NLRB in this filing doesn't say. Workers likely pushed by their employer filed a petition to decertify the Washington-Baltimore News Guild, CWA Local 32035, as the union representing the 7 workers at the Daily Progress in Charlottesville, Virginia. 4 workers at the Cesar Chavez Foundation in Austin, Texas, filed a petition to hold a union election with Lone Star Labor Education. 6 workers at Wells Fargo in Apopka, Florida, filed for a union election with the Communication Workers of America, CWA. 3 workers at Marty Kinsella Collision Center in Florissant, Missouri, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, IAMAW. Workers at 21 different Starbucks locations filed a petition to hold a union election in the largest single day for petition filings since the campaign kicked off a few years ago, including at the following locations in the South: 2 in Denton, Texas, although one of those was later withdrawn, Christiansburg, Virginia, Little Rock, Arkansas, and Sulphur, Louisiana. 13 workers at Louisiana Fair Housing Action Center in New Orleans, Louisiana, filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Auto Workers, UAW, Local 3230. 17 workers at Pro Solar Systems in Christiansted, Virgin Islands, filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Steelworkers, USW, Local 8526. The employer filed a petition to hold a union election after a majority of the 2 workers at TV Oil and Gas in Winfield, West Virginia, demonstrated support for unionization with USW Local 62804. The employer filed a petition to hold a union election after a majority of the 5 workers at Union Oil and Gas in Winfield, West Virginia, also demonstrated support for unionization with USW Local 62804. In campaign updates, ahead of its March shareholder meeting, the AFL-CIO's Strategic Organizing Center built a presentation for shareholders arguing that Starbucks' response to the union efforts have hurt shareholder value. They further argue in favor of replacing 3 board members with more worker-friendly candidates. As the union campaign at Delta rolls on, 145 members of Congress wrote a letter demanding neutrality from the company with the notable absence of any Georgia official. Georgia congressperson and member of the Congressional Labor Caucus, Hank Johnson, has said he is, quote, neutral on the campaign because he is friend of both Delta and the unions. Wow. Yeah. As the UAW is continuing their historic campaign to organize non-union Southern and electric car manufacturing workers, they announced a commitment to spend $40 million over the next 2 years on the campaign. The UAW also announced a new solidarity project to support organizing efforts and build solidarity with workers in Mexico. In election results, 2 workers at Consolidated Nuclear Security in Amarillo, Texas, withdrew their petition for a union election with the Metal Trades Council of Amarillo Local 306, an IAM and OPEIU affiliate. 47 workers at the Texas Tribune withdrew their petition to hold a union election after winning voluntary recognition of their unionization with the News Guild. 99 workers at Monongolia Emergency Medical Services in Morgantown, West Virginia, voted 49-23 in favor of unionization with the International Association of EMTs and Paramedics, IAEP, an SEIU affiliate. 4 workers at Lee County Electric Cooperative in North Fort Myers, Florida, voted 3-1 in favor of unionization with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW, Local 1933. 11 workers at Coquille del Mar in Adjuntas, Puerto Rico, voted 6-5 in favor of unionization with the Coquille del Mar Workers Union. 16 workers at West Virginia University Hospitals in Morgantown, West Virginia, voted 10-6 in favor of unionization with the Laborers International Union of North America, LIUNA, Local 814. In strikes and bargaining updates, a recent decision by the International Trade Commission to not impose tariffs on tin has some steelworkers members in West Virginia concerned about the future of their jobs after Cleveland Cliffs announced they would shutter a tin manufacturing plant in West Virginia indefinitely. USW Local 2911 President Mark Glyptis said he will be fighting to get solutions from D.C. for his 1,000 members that are affected. Housekeepers at the University of North Carolina are calling on the university to end paid parking for workers. Hundreds of ATU Local 689 workers are on strike against Fairfax Connector in Virginia. Management of WAMU, American University Radio, an NPR affiliate station, announced their intent to lay off 15 workers and News Guild members, as well as shut down the DCist, a newsletter run by the station. The president of the News Guild encouraged the general manager of the station to reverse course or resign. UAW Local 862 and Ford avoided a strike last week after Ford addressed the concerns of the workers at the Kentucky truck plant surrounding safety. The NBA's Washington Wizards and the NHL's Washington Capitals were proposing moves from D.C. to Northern Virginia, but are facing opposition from unions in Northern Virginia, with Virginia Diamond, Northern Virginia AFL-CIO president, saying, quote, "There's been no interest at all on the part of this developer to consider signing agreements that would protect the rights of workers." In politics and legislation, a bill that would allow 14 and 15-year-old Alabama children who are failing school to get jobs without authorization from the school or their parents made it out of a Senate committee last week without Democratic opposition. In West Virginia, a similar bill passed the House of Delegates. New legislation proposed in Florida to build on the anti-union bill that passed last year has made it out of a House committee. The bill could make it easier to decertify some public sector bargaining units while also granting more exemptions to others. A joint venture to build a battery manufacturing plant between Ford and South Korean manufacturer SK in Kentucky is facing struggles as workers report mold, sickness, and grueling hours. Tennessee Senate Democrats proposed and Tennessee Senate Republicans rejected legislation that would cap insulin at $35 a month, import drugs from Canada, provide medical debt relief for Tennesseans, and exclude medical bills from credit reports. Kentucky Teamsters are advocating against a state House bill that would legalize driverless trucks in Kentucky with little to no oversight. CWA is supporting legislation that would increase penalties for assaulting a utility worker in Georgia, and the Teamsters donated $45,000 to the Republican National Committee in January, days before Sean O'Brien's meeting with Trump, newly public records have confirmed. We are going to go ahead and head to a break. We're going to be right back with Dan Letwin talking about the history of interracial unionism in Alabama's coal mines. Stay tuned.
Benefit Architects has proudly supported union members and union-made products for over 35 years. If you are a federal employee and an AFGE member, you're eligible for hundreds of dollars in money-saving benefits, including group life insurance, dental insurance, and AFLAC insurance. Additionally, if you're a union member but don't work for the federal government, you can still qualify for several of these money-saving policies. So give Tate Hure a call at 256-215-6769 for details and to enroll. Again, that is Tate Hure at 256-215-6769.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and family members are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough even to keep their jobs. We can fix this. It's time for us to find a way to close the health care coverage gap so that people can remain at work. Let's make this a priority. Let's close this gap and cover Alabama. To learn more and how you can help, visit coveralabama.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Attention union members, membership organizations, podcasters, or anyone with a payment processing need. The future is here, and your organization needs to be prepared by working with Unionly. With Unionly, your union or organization can take payments on a mobile device, eliminating processing fees, giving you a better price than other payment processing methods, while at the same time supporting a union-friendly business with a specialized skill set to meet your needs. Your members will thank you when they pay their dues at their convenience without waiting in line to deposit cash or check. Start preparing for the future today by calling 206-595-8631 or visiting unionly.io.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
I'm attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law, the name with proven results.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Folks, this is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. I have with me Adam Keller. If you are just tuning in, you can check out the stream for anything that you missed on YouTube or Facebook. You can also find us wherever you listen to your podcasts. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number if you'd like to call into the show or leave a voicemail after we're off the air. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Like the stream if you're watching us on YouTube or Facebook. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We are talking to Dan Letwin. Have we got him on the line?
We do.
Fantastic. So Daniel Letwin is an associate professor of history at Penn State University, where he specializes in labor, race relations, and the American South. He is author of The Challenge of Interracial Unionism, Alabama Coal Miners from 1878 to 1921. He's also our next guest. Dan, welcome to the program.
Nice to be here. Do you hear an echo?
Yeah, I hear an echo. Where is that coming from? I wonder, Adam.
I don't know.
Let's see if I can tweak that real quick.
So while we're trying to figure that out, I'll give everybody kind of a preview of this book. It's pretty kind of obvious what's going on here, The Challenge of Interracial Unionism, Alabama Coal Miners. But the really interesting thing is that the coal mines in Alabama and the organization of coal miners in Alabama has always been interracial. There has never been, during this period, 100 years ago, over 100 years ago, you do not think about black and white workers coming together and organizing across race lines, and that's exactly what was happening in Alabama. I mean, really at the depth of Jim Crow. One of the things that Letwin takes pains to mention and kind of illustrate is that while Alabama was rewriting our Constitution in 1901, the really revanchist and racist, explicitly white supremacist Alabama Constitution that was written in 1901 by the Redeemers after they came into power after the end of Reconstruction. While that was happening, coal miners in Alabama with the United Mine Workers were organizing interracially, black and white coal miners together. I mean, just really a fantastic and amazing history. Not something that you would imagine going on in a place like Alabama at a time like 1901. Have we got the echo figured out?
Let's try.
Let's hear. Hello?
Yes.
I think we're fine. You hear me?
I do. Thanks.
Awesome.
Appreciate your patience.
Yes. It is an amazing story that. It goes against what we would expect in the Deep South, the New South of the late 19th and early 20th century. It's interesting enough that any union found such momentum and power in a bastion of anti-unionism like Alabama. But particularly fascinating, I thought, was the fact that at the height, as you say, the height or the depths of Jim Crow, you have a labor organization that submerges the color line to the extent that organizations like the Knights of Labor and eventually and especially the United Mine Workers managed to do.
Right. And so, before we dive too much deeper into that, why this topic? What is it that not somebody from Alabama, right? You didn't grow up in Pennsylvania, I don't think. If I remember right, you told me that you grew up elsewhere, but it was in Alabama. So what was it about this story that, how did you find out about it? And then once you found out about it, what was it that made you want to write a book?
Yeah. Well, I'm not from Alabama. In fact, I'm from Los Angeles. That does not have a lot of coal mines. But I guess I came out of a family with a tradition of connection to the labor movement and to struggles for racial justice. And so I think I first heard about an interracial union, an interracial labor movement in the coal fields of Alabama. A brief reference in the classic work by C. Vann Woodward, The Origins of the New South, who mentioned in a paragraph or two, as I recall, that even as the kind of the ruling classes of the New South, the great plantation owners, the industrialists, the financial interests, and the kind of bourbon Democrats that ran things, even while they were consolidating their power, there were around the South certain pockets of interracial labor mobilization. Well, in part, also the populists had an interracial dimension. But from the dock workers of New Orleans, timber workers in Louisiana and East Texas, and not least the coal fields of Alabama, you had these traditions of organizing among Black and white workers collectively. And I guess I thought I wanted to know more about that. I wanted to understand how an enterprise like the United Mine Workers managed as well as it did, and there were great limits in what it was able to accomplish, how it managed in a Jim Crow region to organize a union comprised almost equally, as the coal fields were themselves comprised almost equally of Black and white miners, and how did they contest and kind of negotiate the pressures brought by segregation, disfranchisement, and just kind of the racial hostility and separation that permeated their world.
And so, like you said, I mean, that's something that I think for a lot of people, even potentially folks that are not as interested and in this kind of stuff like we are, of course, we're union members from Alabama. We're kind of ideological about the thing. You're kind of ideological about the thing. But I think, even normal people, right? I think even normal people, this is kind of an interesting story. And so let's talk about that. Give us, what is your overall, give us the broad strokes of the Alabama coal miners, and their various organizations. Actually, it was primarily the United Mine Workers, but there were precursors to that in the Greenback Labor Party and the Knights of Labor. broad strokes, the Alabama mine workers and their adventures in interracial unionism during this time period. And just a reminder, we're talking to Daniel Letwin, Associate Professor of History at Penn State, the author of Alabama Coal Miners: The Challenge of Interracial Unionism.
Yeah. Well, a bit of background. Birmingham does not exist until after the Civil War. And so it's founded it's established in an old cornfield in 1871. And it's called Birmingham by the kind of the planners of it, because there's a sense that now the time is ripe to develop the coal and iron deposits and perhaps build a coal, iron, and steel rival to Pittsburgh in the South. It never attains that status. But especially after starting in the late 1870s, you have the rise of coal mining in the district surrounding Birmingham, and coming to the coal fields to work are white miners, largely out of coal fields to the north, some from Britain, other coal fields, some coming off of more local rural areas, and many Black African Americans, again, largely coming out of the agricultural districts of Alabama and elsewhere. And so one thing that means is that from the very outset, approximately half the miners in the coal fields in the 1870s and growing into the 1880s and beyond, approximately half are white and half are Black. What that means is that unlike in some other industries where African Americans enter the labor force as intruders on a white terrain, as white workers see it, there never is. The coal fields of Alabama never are a white terrain. It's always, for various reasons, mixed from the beginning. And what that means is that as workers in the era of the Greenbackers and then the Knights of Labor and the turbulent period of the 80s and then into the 1890s and beyond, if you're going to organize a challenge to the exploitations and the dictatorial practices of the coal operators, you have a choice to make. Are you going to organize only with it, are whites going to only organize as white miners and exclude African Americans or not? Are African Americans going to throw in their lot with white miners, or are they going to steer clear? And there were, of course, some miners who may have felt that way, but the prevailing sentiment was that the only way that miners could effectively challenge the operators was to organize across the color line. So, in part, it was a very pragmatic decision, and we want to be careful not to romanticize. To say that Black and white miners organized collectively is not to say that the Knights of Labor or the UMW was conceived as a civil rights organization, and certainly not to say that it was uninfected by by white supremacist feelings among the white miners. There's plenty of racism, of course, in the coal fields. But there was an understanding that white miners didn't have the power, they didn't have the ability, as white workers sometimes did in other industries, to kind of say, we decide who works here. They didn't have power over who got jobs. They didn't have the power to exclude African Americans. And that is a part of the foundation for organizing collectively.
And you said that in large part it was pragmatic, and I think there are some stories that you retell in your book that hint at least some amount of real, genuine, progressive fellow feeling type of stuff between these black and white coal miners. But certainly there was an explicitly pragmatic element there. And the reason for that is that, the conditions were extremely difficult, and there was need recognized by, both the black and white miners for something to change in the coal mines of Alabama. Can you explain for us or talk to us about the conditions that miners faced in coal mines in Alabama around that time?
Oh, yeah. The miners were, a raid against the miners was just a whole race. When miners didn't have a union, to secure the roof over the room, this is kind of pick and shovel, the days of pick and shovel mining. Miners would sometimes have to go into the woods before they came to work to find wood to prop up the roofs. When you had a union contract, then the company would generally have to do that. And miners wouldn't even be paid for the time they spent in what's called dead work, laying tracks into the rooms. They were routinely docked their pay arbitrarily, essentially what we now call wage theft. Cheating at the weighing, at the point where the coal is weighed. Long hours of labor, terrible ventilation, not to mention, of course, low pay, pressure to shop in the mining camps that were dominated by the company store, paid in scrip, where you could only be redeemed at company stores that overcharged the miners. I'm just beginning to get into the whole array of grievances, not to mention vulnerability to very low pay, unreliable access to work, pressure to have what was called subcontracting, which meant that miners would be expected to take on laborers, and laborers in kind of subcontract, and they would have to pay the laborers. That violated a deep tradition of coal miners everywhere around much of the world, of mutuality, of the idea that what the miners tended to want was to work on a buddy system, right, where two miners work together, or perhaps the father trained the son. With a fair turn, everyone had an equal access to a coal car. These traditions of interdependency, that for our safety and for our dignity and for our autonomy, we need to work together. And that's where it was often said that everyone, at the end of the day, everyone came out of the coal mines black, covered with coal dust, which physically is true, but also that was it had a symbolic meaning that while the coal miners blacks and whites did not intermarry, they didn't live in the same neighborhoods, they didn't, above ground, they didn't worship in the same churches, they lived in this kind of segregated world, but underground, they needed each other. There was a deep sentiment of solidarity, that came out of shared experience, and so that's why I think you're right, that it wasn't just pragmatic. It wasn't that white miners, for instance, are holding their noses and say, okay, we'll organize with blacks because we have no choice. You see evidence time and again, alongside the racism that existed as well, of kind of a genuine sense of fellowship, because that comes from this common experience and identity of being coal miners.
And, just to expand on the dead work, for folks who may not understand exactly what's going on there, that a lot of that dead work was really, a lot of it was tied to safety, right? And so if you are not being paid for this dead work, like securing the ceilings, making sure stuff doesn't fall, and laying down tracks and all this stuff, and you're not getting paid for it, and then on top of that, you're being paid extremely low rates for the coal that you do mine, the incentive is obvious, right? You are going to be less keen on spending time ensuring your safety, and so, the numbers from the time, they bear that out. The accidents were extremely common in the coal mines. Deaths were not unheard of, and deaths decreased whenever the workers, whether officially through a union contract or unofficially through, exercising their power in some other way, were able to get dead work either paid for or performed by company men who were paid by the company in a different way. Deaths decreased when things like that happened.
Right.
And so, you were talking about the genuine, solidarity and fellow feelings between these folks. And one of the most explicit and, I think, really beautiful instances of that was that the Birmingham Trades Council or Labor Council they decided that they would not allow black union members in their hall, or they would not accept black unions, something like that. Can you explain the situation and the United Mine Workers' response to that?
Yeah, the Birmingham Labor Council, I believe it was called. This was in 1901. That the Birmingham Labor Council just kind of issued its own decree that only black people would have access to the hall where they worked, and the UMW said no. They challenged them and forced the Labor Council to back down. I mentioned it's 1901 because that's also the year where the Alabama state constitution was amended to disfranchise African Americans. So that means it's the coincidence. I think it's just weeks apart that this happened. It's not to say, by the way, that the UMW over this period kind of launched an unrestrained assault on Jim Crow. In fact, the union throughout the 90s and into the new century structured its interracial practices in a very careful way. So, for instance, District 20, the Alabama district, then as now, of the UMW, the president, by a kind of an understood arrangement, the president would always be white, the vice president would be black, the secretary treasurer white, the executive council would be kind of arranged, kind of as a quota, something like 5 white members, 3 black members, and these positions were kind of appointed, themselves by committees. So there's one time at a meeting of the district where I believe a black delegate said, "Why don't we change the way in which officials are selected so they're not selected by indirectly, kind of like the founding fathers did with Congress, indirect election filters." But that they be elected directly by the whole membership. And the white president said, "We can't do that because that could mean that we'll have a black president. And if we have a black president, we're screwed." I mean, in this climate. And then a black leader, it might have been the vice president, sort of gets up and affirms that. He says, "No, we can't have, total popular election because we might wind up with a black president."
Right.
It's very poignant, but I think it reflects an understanding that in order to have breathing space, it's already remarkable that in this period that there was enough breathing space for a union that included blacks and whites in any way. The fact that could happen in this period was amazing, but there's a sense we can't push things too far.
Right.
They were always at pains to say, we're not pushing for social equality. We're not pushing for we're not pushing for the right to vote for African Americans. Now, in some measure, that it may have been because that might have been a bridge too far for many of the white members. But I think also it was an understanding that, we are going to subject ourselves to such an onslaught of repression, of even heightened repression beyond what we already face in the public, if we are seen as a civil rights enterprise.
Right. And it really is amazing how, I can just almost hear the conversations that are not recorded that these people are having amongst themselves outside of the meeting rooms, or the thoughts that are going through their minds as they're trying to walk this tightrope. Because, at the same time, right, they can't allow black presidents, but they have a black vice president. And so the idea that in 1901 you're going to have a black person who is, in effect and de facto and de jure over, right, 90, a bunch of all of the white rank and file members, that in and of itself, right, that's huge. And but then they're like, we can't go too far. But then also having effectively a quota system to ensure that there are black minors on the executive council. That is, and then the routine denunciations of social equality. And then at the same time, some of those denunciations were really, they were wording things very carefully, right? And I just thought of that now, and I wish I had pulled the quote. I'm not sure if you can if you can remember it off the top of your head, but I'm thinking of one where they wrote a letter in one of the labor newspapers. Officially, the thing that they wanted people to take away was they were denouncing social equality, but there were some hints at that, social equality, whatever you call it, it would, if we're able to do, if we have, what was it, good union wages, then all of the good things of social equality would follow. Do you remember that? What the article that I'm talking about?
To be honest, I'm not sure I do exactly, but I mean certainly what you're talking about. Social equality was the kind of the big boogeyman, right, in this whole era, right? It was the kind of the nuclear option rhetorically for the segregationists that say, if you are calling for equal pay, if you're calling for the right to vote, if you're calling for interracial organization in the coal fields, that's going to be the kind of that's going to be the opening wedge to this horrible thing called social equality, which was a vague term. But what it alluded to is the idea that the social barriers between whites and blacks will fall away. And if you dug deep enough, what you often got to was this image of black men and white women and interracial sex. And you'll just have amalgamation, and the white race will disappear. And that was really potent rhetorical kind of dynamite. So the union defenders of the union would say, look, that's not what we're about. We're not for social equality. But also they tried to kind of diffuse it in a way and say, if by social equality you just mean blacks and whites are working together, what's wrong with that? But very careful to avoid this kind of to deflect that inflammatory association. But there were limits to how effectively they could deflect it. So there were a series of major strikes, kind of do or die strikes, that each get a chapter really more or less a chapter in this book. In 1894, there's a district-wide strike that is remarkable in the kind of the interracial solidarity that it shows, even when black strikebreakers are brought in en masse to try and break the strike. It helps break the strike, but it does not it does not undercut the cooperation among black and white unionists. And the same thing happens in a 26-month strike that begins in 1904, another district-wide strike in 1908. But by 1908, the rising tide of Jim Crow. I mean, it's the racial climate is more toxic than ever as we get into the early years of the 20th century, and when it looks like the Union might be able to withstand the onslaught in 1908 of federal troops, of mass evictions from company housing, of violence brought upon them, and legal repression by the state. Looks like they're still holding out. The social equality charge is unveiled, and this hysteria is promulgated by the pro-company newspapers and the governor of the state and the employers and middle class, largely black opponents of the union, and they're all talking about how what's going on in the tent colonies that miners have retreated to when they were kicked out of their company housing because they were on strike. What's going on in those tent colonies? Black men and white women in the same and that was devastating. It provided the basis for the governor eventually to send in troops and to crush the tent colonies, mass arrests. That kind of social equality charge and the race baiting was incredibly effective at times like this.
It is really interesting how effective all of the forces that were arrayed against the unions were in actually defeating strikes, and yet even with the strikes defeated, they were not able to break the bonds that had been forged between these black and white coal miners and devolve their relationships into what the powers that be at the time would have really liked to see, like some sort of race riot within the union between the black and white coal miners. There's just never any incident of that happening, it seems, and yet the strikes were defeated. And so at once, the story of the Alabama coal miners with the Greenbackers, with the Knights of Labor, and with the UMW is a really, is heroic and inspirational and really cool to see. And then at the same time, just kind of because of the material realities of of Alabama in the late 1800s, early 1900s, the miners were ultimately defeated basically at each do or die strike. They were able to win some important concessions at various times, and maybe you can talk to us about those. But they were ultimately defeated.
Yeah, they were up against formidable forces in this era. They did have certain the miners' unions did have certain cards to play. So, for instance, they often got popular support on the issue of convict labor.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I'm so glad you brought that up.
From the outset of it's a classic kind of New South neo-slavery. You steal especially it was predominantly black African Americans who were funneled into the convict labor system, although there were some whites as well. You steal a chicken, you get drunk, and rather than just land up in jail for the night or two, you might be sentenced to work as a convict at a coal mine for 3 years. You can imagine this was hideous conditions for the convicts, and this by the way continued in Alabama until the 1920s. But it was also one of the major grievances of the coal miners, and in part that's because it was a degradation of their dignity as coal miners that they're forced to work either alongside, but more often in mines next to mines where convicts were deployed. It undercut their own leverage, of course. It's one of the ways, it was one of the factors that was on the working for the operators, that when the miners went on strike, well, they could just ratchet up their or round up more convicts, and that was a very a very controllable form of scab labor. But the convict labor system was very unpopular, not just among the miners, but local farmers, shopkeepers, many of the other workers in other industries, middle classes. In part, it shocked the conscience of many. So always a major issue in this period was the call for the abolition of convict labor, and that garnered a lot of support. The other card I think that really worked for the miners was, I mean, it sounds rhetorical, but I think it's really true, just the deep, kind of the wellsprings of solidarity that just were rooted in common experience and common grievances. And the fact that, often these are skilled miners, they have leverage that comes from their skill and experience and their impulses to organize collectively. But what they're up against, the ready access to scabs or blacklegs, as strikebreakers were called, convict labor. It's the classic kind of Gilded Age, or kind of back in the day of this period. The deputy sheriffs from county to in the various counties, the state troops sent in, the courts prepared to enjoin labor activity. Of course, we know from Warrior Met, some of these might seem all too chillingly familiar. Right. But the financial powers, local government, the what we now call the media, the main papers, virulently anti-union. That said, as you point out, there were moments where sometimes at local, not district wide, but at one company or another, workers could go on strike with real effect and win. In the years immediately surrounding the turn of the century, so from around 1898 to 1903 or so, the major coal companies, some of them connected with iron and steel, began to work with the union, with the UMW, negotiated contracts, and that was kind of reflecting a trend that was happening around the country, a kind of a sense that maybe we can stabilize labor relations by negotiating contracts. And while that was happening, I wouldn't call it a golden age, but it was a moment where pay, the kind of pushing back on dead work, hours of labor, on a number of issues, and just simply the right to organize and have a kind of a mechanism for sorting out grievances and so forth. For a handful of years, that became the new normal in the coal fields. But for various reasons, by around 1903 or 1904, again, reflecting a kind of a broader national trend, there was an open shop drive, passing legislation that was anti-boycott in Alabama, and the operators chose to rid themselves of the unions, and that, combined with the fact that the racial atmosphere of the South and of Alabama were becoming more toxic than ever, meant that unionism would be crushed in 1908, and it wouldn't revive again until a decade later with the coming of World War I.
Right, and the and the repression that the unions faced was not just that they brought in scabs or I mean, people were actually murdered by the state and by company thugs, and one of the things that I found most interesting, it was certainly not the most repressive or anything like that, but having grown up in a very evangelical household and, listening to conservative radio, I heard all the time concerns about the church being shut down by the government because the preacher's not willing to do gay marriages, right? And while that's never happened. That's yet to happen. The state of Alabama actually shut down churches because they supported the striking coal miners, interestingly enough, in the early 1900s. And so, that I thought that was one, something that stood out to me among all of the other stuff, like I said, murders and all this by the state and company thugs. As we wrap up, could you, I'm interested in how you see the connection between the history of Alabama's coal miners and the state of labor in Alabama today. You alluded to the Warrior Met strike that just ended. I think in failure, I don't think it's controversial to say. The really valiant effort that they put up there. The UAW campaign that is really going to be, in many ways centered in Alabama. They're targeting non-union and electric car makers across the country, but Alabama has more than any other single state. The propaganda that's going around around the UAW campaign, it reminded me a lot of some of the propaganda that was going around in opposition to the UMW campaigns in the early 1900s. So yeah, as we close out, I'm just interested in what you see as the connecting threads between these two periods of Alabama history.
Right. Well, I mean, to begin with, there's obviously differences. That Warrior miners didn't have to think about convict labor to undermine them. You didn't have state troops with Gatling guns coming through. There's obvious differences, but consider there were times when the labor conflicts in the late 19th, early 20th century would come when miners, when the union said, "Look, we made concessions, we took wage cuts when times were hard. Why are you reneging on your obligation to share the benefits when times get better?" Well, does that sound familiar with Warrior Met? The violence brought upon workers on the picket lines, the habitual harassment, and at times, literal, really coarse and devastating violence at Warrior Met would look all too familiar to what workers encountered in the coal fields 120, 130, 140 years ago. I think there was a resilience for some time, from what I understand at Warrior Met, of the passion and solidarity among the strikers. But I also know that there was demoralization, and it's hard to sustain a 21-month strike. Whatever support may have come from the organization, the national organization, it's very hard to sustain, and I think that would also be a grim reality that's familiar, would be familiar to veterans of the earlier struggles. But I think if one were to fall asleep in the early 20th century, a UMW activist from Alabama, and to wake up in the early 2020s and see the Warrior Met strike, there'd be, I think, a real an affirmation that the spirit of unionism and the often terrible forces that they're up against, they both remain very alive today.
Professor Daniel Letwin, Associate Professor of History at Penn State, author of Alabama Coal Miners, 1878 to 1921, The Challenge of Interracial Unionism. Buy it. Highly recommend it. You can go to Red Emma's, a worker-owned bookstore, online and buy it there, or Powell's, which is a union bookstore, and if you use the union's affiliate link, 7.5% of your purchase will go to their strike fund. So you can buy it at either of those places. Daniel Letwin, really appreciate your time. Really enjoyed the conversation.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, brother. Yeah, really enjoyed that. Always down to learn more about Alabama labor history. So that was great.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's really, there was some other stuff that I wanted to get to, but we're running out of time. It's crazy. Time flies by when you're talking to somebody like that. So yeah, really appreciate his book and his time. I would recommend folks check it out. I couldn't put it down when I was reading it. So we're going to go ahead and take a break. We'll be right back with Boss Wash, and we are going to bring you the latest on the UAW campaign in Alabama. Stay tuned, folks.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and neighbors are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough to keep their jobs. We need to fix this. Let's close the health care coverage gap. To learn more, visit coveralabama.org.
Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Iron Workers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs, from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Iron Workers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
The Laborers International Union of North America, Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact Donna at their training center to start the process. That phone number is 256-415-7452. Again, that phone number is 256-415-7452. No experience is needed. Free training is offered, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is their mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
I'm attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law. The name with proven results.
Come on,
only Union Talk radio show. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host Adam Keller. Our pre-orders are up for our logo cap, tvlr.fm/store. What we want to do, ideally, is purchase a run of 100. But to be able to do that, and to do that comfortably with the budget that we have, we really need at least 30 pre-orders to help us defray some of those costs. Otherwise, if we don't get that, then we may have to order a smaller run. And folks, hats are way more expensive than they were 4 years ago. Holy crap, it's crazy. We bought these hats like 3 or 4 years ago, and we did a run of 100 for like $17 a pop. And now if we do a run of 100, it's $25 a pop on our end, right? So we're selling them we're trying to sell them for $35 to make a little bit of money on those. But if we can only do 50, that's $30 a pop. So we'll be really not raising a whole lot of money on these if we're not able to do a run of 100. So really want to try to get at least 30 pre-orders. You can find it online, tvlr.fm/store. They're really good. They're dad caps. They've got a union bug on them. All of our merch is union. It's kind of shocking to me when I see like progressive and left-leaning and socialist programs and projects come out with merch and it's not union. It's like, that's bonkers to me. I don't it's kind of difficult for me to understand what's going on there. But we don't do that. All of our merch is 100% union made in the USA. You're not going to find on the back of your, on your TVLR shirt or your TVLR cap made in Vietnam or Bangladesh. Not going to see that on any of our stuff. So tvlr.fm/store to pre-order your logo cap. $35 plus shipping. Okay, so every week, bosses are killing people, bosses are stealing from their workers, bosses are misbehaving all the time, and we want to remind people of that because they're not going to hear it in other places. So let's do Boss Watch. In Virginia, the U.S. Department of Labor's Wage and Hour Division has recovered nearly $900,000 in back wages and damages after its investigation found a Norfolk home care employer denied 108 workers their hard-earned overtime pay. The division's investigation found that Advantage Home Care, LLC, and co-owners Dondra Nichols and Philip Simons failed to pay required overtime rates for all hours worked over 40 in a work week and did not maintain accurate records of hours worked. The employers paid $438,000 in back wages and an equal amount in liquidated damages for these violations of the Fair Labor Standards Act. In Alabama, a federal investigation into an August 2023 horrific fatal incident at a Phoenix City sawmill revealed for the second time in 3 years that the employer could have prevented a tragedy by following required safety rules. The U.S. Department of Labor's Occupational Safety and Health Administration, responding to reports by first responders, found that a 67-year-old sawmill supervisor at MDLG Incorporated, operating as Phoenix Lumber Company, had climbed on top of an auger to access a difficult-to-reach area to unclog a wood chipper. Jesus. Because of the multiple failures by the employer to protect him, the machine started while the employee was on top of the auger. The 20-year employee was caught in the machinery and fatally injured. In response to the August 2023 fatal incident, OSHA cited Phoenix Lumber Company as well as its owners John Menza Dudley Jr. and Leslie Elizabeth Dudley with 22 willful violations, 1 repeat violation, and 5 serious violations, totaling $2.47 million in proposed penalties. Specifically, the agency found the employer failed to ensure employees used energy control procedures to prevent the unexpected startup of machines while performing maintenance and servicing activities such as clearing jams. They failed to ensure the use of lockout-tagout devices on machinery when performing maintenance. They also failed to provide training to employees on the purpose and function of the energy control program, as well as ensure they have the knowledge and skills required for the safe application of energy control measures. They failed to maintain guarding on machines that posed amputation hazards to employees, and they failed to require fall protection to be used in areas above 4 feet. Prior to these citations, Phoenix Lumber Company had been inspected 4 times in the last 5 years, including a fatality inspection in 2020 that resulted in the agency citing the company with 4 willful and 10 serious violations. OSHA added the employer to the agency's Severe Violators Enforcement Program back in 2020, a program for employers who endanger workers by committing willful, repeat, or failure to abate violations that could lead to fatalities or catastrophic injuries. Employers remain on the list until they can demonstrate certain criteria and safety standards within a 3-year time frame. In Tennessee, the U.S. Department of Labor today asked a federal court to issue a nationwide temporary restraining order and injunction against Fayette Janitorial Service, LLC, operating as Fayette Industrial, to stop the Tennessee-based company from illegally employing children while the department continues its investigations of the company's labor practices. Filed by the department's Office of the Solicitor in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Iowa, the request for a restraining order is prompted by investigations by the department's Wage and Hour Division. Investigators discovered Fayette employed children to clean and sanitize spaces and equipment during overnight shifts to fulfill sanitation contracts at a Purdue Farms plant in Accomack, Virginia, and at Seaboard Triumph Foods, LLC in Sioux City, Iowa. The Fair Labor Standards Act bans children under the age of 18 from working in dangerous occupations, including most jobs in meat and poultry slaughtering, processing, rendering, and packing establishments. In its filing, the department alleges Fayette employed 15 children hired as young as 13 years old in Virginia and at least 9 children in Iowa on its overnight sanitation shifts. Minors were used to clean dangerous kill floor equipment such as head splitters, jaw pullers, meat bandsaws, and neck clippers. At least one 14-year-old at the Virginia facility suffered severe injuries while employed by Fayette. Fayette Janitorial Service, LLC of Somerville, Tennessee, provides contract sanitation and cleaning services for meat and poultry processing facilities, including Purdue Farms and Seaboard Triumph Foods, in about 30 states and employs more than 600 workers. The Department of Labor's investigations into Fayette are ongoing. Absolutely deplorable, wicked behavior from this company. But again, not looking at any criminal charges here. Despicable. Had a few dishonorable mentions, wanted to make sure that we shared those with you, even though we don't have time to go into them deeply. Federal safety investigators learned that a 41-year-old maintenance technician at Aladdin Columbus Foundry in Columbus, Georgia, endured severe injuries. Severe injuries from an electrical transformer explosion and opened a second investigation. The company was cited for 22 serious and 3 other than serious violations, including failure to mandate electrical suits and insulated tools, for a total of $182,000. The U.S. Department of Labor's Wage and Hour Division recovered $97,000 in back wages and damages for 26 workers who were not paid overtime by Matryoshka Deli in North Miami Beach, Florida. The U.S. Department of Labor's Wage and Hour Division recovered $37,000 in back wages for 37 workers who were not paid overtime by EAS Homes in Charleston, South Carolina. And the U.S. DOL's Wage and Hour Division recovered $52,000 in tips, back wages, and damages to more than 13 workers who had these wages stolen from them by Mura Ichiban Restaurant and Nam Damoon Restaurant in Saipan, Marianas Islands.
I had to look that up, the acronym.
Yes.
When I saw that on the DOL's
MP.
website.
MP is the acronym for Marianas Islands, not intuitive. The U.S. Department of Labor's Occupational Safety and Health Administration has cited an LMI finishing in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, $284,000 for exposing workers to nearly 24 safety hazards following a complaint about a lax safety environment at the company's plant in Catoosa. So yeah, there we go. Boss watch. Boss is bad. That's the moral of the story there. We're going to wrap up with this, the latest on the UAW campaign in Alabama. We know that the workers at Mercedes in Vance outside of Tuscaloosa are closing in on 50%. They have already hit 30% cards signed. Cards signed meaning, when I say cards, I'm meaning authorization cards. And so those are documents either electronic or, in paper that employees sign stating that they authorize the United Auto Workers to be their union. That it's a card that says, like, it's not a card that says I want a union election, right? That's not what an authorization card says. An authorization card says I authorize the UAW or whatever union to be my union. This is who I want as my certified bargaining representative, right? That's what these cards say.
And by the way, if you're an auto worker, go to uaw.org/join to find out how to sign that card.
Exactly. uaw.org/join to sign one of them cards. So in Mercedes, like I said, they've hit 30% cards signed, almost 50%. They've already hit 50% in Volkswagen in Tennessee. But the Mercedes executives are running scared about this, and so they are holding mandatory anti-union meetings. Michael Goebel, who oversees production, this is from Bloomberg. The title is Mercedes U.S. Executive Warned Against Unionizing at Mandatory Meeting, UAW says. This is in Bloomberg by Josh Idelson is the author. You can find it. Good work by Josh Idelson. He always does good work. So, okay. Michael Goebel, who oversees production in North America and is Chief Executive Officer of Mercedes-Benz U.S. International, addressed employees Thursday at the company's factory in Vance, Alabama. Goebel suggested that unionization would mean work stoppages, costly dues, and obstacles to conflict resolution. Obstacles to conflict resolution. Absurd. According to an audio recording reviewed by Bloomberg News.
Well, I mean, he's being honest. It is an obstacle to resolve their conflicts, right?
In the way that it's an obstacle to resolve the conflicts in the way that they would prefer, which is that they get exactly their way and have to not listen to their employees.
Right. It's kind of like the Bill of Rights is an obstacle for some police officers.
That's true. That's true, actually. Yeah. So there you go. I don't believe the UAW can help us to be better, Goebel said. Mercedes-Benz said the meeting was a routine one where multiple business topics were covered. Yeah, super routine for a chief
executive officer to show up in Vance, Alabama.
Right. Super, just totally routine. This happens all the time.
He probably was just curious about Alabama spring football, was in the neighborhood, you know, wanted to see what's going on with the new coach.
Exactly, yeah. I'm sure that's what it was. This German, right? A German guy, super interested in what's going on in Alabama, the Alabama football. Yeah, totally. In addition, our CEO gave his opinion on the UAW's current campaign. You know, in addition to this totally standard, meeting where other business topics were addressed and, nothing, totally normal thing. It just and just over the course of the meeting, he was like, while he was there, I'll give my opinion on the UAW campaign. A company spokesperson, Edward Taylor, said in an email. In doing so, he emphasized that the decision on unionization is ultimately up to each individual team member, and we must respect each other's opinions. Mercedes will continue to share facts and opinions through open and direct communications to support our team members in making an informed decision. Mercedes official principles include a section on union rights, stating that the company and its executives shall remain neutral in the event of organization campaigns. It also says, quote, the trade unions and the company will ensure that employees can make an independent decision. I don't know about you, but when I think of somebody staying neutral, I do not think of somebody coming in and saying, quote, that their workers, quote, shouldn't have to pay union dues. I believe you shouldn't have to go through strikes, years of negotiation, or complicated processes to communicate and resolve conflicts. I don't think that doesn't sound neutral to me, right? We actually heard earlier in the program Hank Johnson's version of neutrality in Georgia, where you're just not going to say anything about a union campaign in your state, even though you're a member of the Congressional Labor Caucus. Insane. Absolutely Looney Tunes. But, look, at least that is on its face neutral, right? Hank Johnson is officially being neutral. Now, I think that there's an argument that, neutrality in the face of, this kind of stuff is really, support for the bosses. But nevertheless, his official position and his statements are neutral. He is not saying, I'm neutral, and then going to the Delta facilities and saying to the workers, I don't believe that you need a union. I don't believe that, I don't believe you should have to pay union dues, right? That's not neutral, obviously.
That's anti,
obviously. Yeah, so in Thursday's remarks to employees, Goebel said workers, quote, shouldn't have to pay union dues that generate millions of dollars per year for an organization where you have no transparency where that money is used, according to the recording.
So they just lying.
Yeah, absolutely, just lying. Because you have infinitely more transparency about how unions spend their money than you do corporations, right? Obviously, unions, U.S. law, and Idelson, to his credit, he's a good reporter, mentions in the very next paragraph, U.S. law requires unions to disclose information about their budgets and spending.
And there is like some democratic process to some extent, right?
Exactly.
That varies from union to union. Some is more democratic than others, et cetera, et cetera. But like, bottom line, somebody's voting on it.
Exactly. Somebody's voting on it that you have some direct or indirect say over, and whatever is spent, you can find it, right? And some unions make it easier to find than others, but even if your union doesn't want you to find it, you can find it because it's on the Department of Labor's website, okay? Like, this thing is super transparent, way more transparent than companies. And in fact, at my union meetings every single month, we have a treasurer's report where I see every single cent that comes into my union and every single cent that leaves my union. And then I get to vote on whether or not to accept this treasurer's report. I voted last month on 2024's budget. Every single cent allocated. We debated about it. We discussed it. We heard explanations of why the executive board wanted to spend money in this area and that area. And then we as a union voted on it in a meeting that was open to all members, right? Way more transparency. You do not get that kind of transparency when you're talking about the money that Mercedes spends, the money that Mercedes gets because of the labor, because of the value that these workers create. Totally different worlds. I mean, just lying, like Adam said, just lying. Goebel also said it's important that we all respect different opinions and different viewpoints and to not let the team become divided. Quote, being a high-performing team and family is not always easy. It takes everyone's opinions being respected and considered.
Right. I mean, there's some people who are right, and then there's some people who are wrong. But I guess we should respect and consider all.
Yes, exactly, yeah. We all know what management is doing, and this is, again, from the article. We all know what management is doing. They are panicking about us winning our fair share and winning our union, Mercedes employee Jacob Ryan said in a statement from the UAW. The campaign has already caused the company to make improvements such as raising pay, Ryan said. Quote, Mercedes clearly only listens when we organize, and we're going to keep at it until we win a better life and win our union. In addition to that, reactions that the UAW shared with Bloomberg, we reached out to Mercedes employee, and were sent reactions from other members and assessments from the workers about other workers' opinions after this meeting. And so one worker said, quote, they know they're doing it because of the union and they still want it. Speaking of the workers know that Mercedes is doing it because of the union and the workers still want the union. Another person said of the workers, they're not buying it. Another person saying of the company, they want to control what we deserve instead of giving it. A person said of the CEO, he's a laughing stock. A person said of the CEO, it took him 5 years to realize he wasn't doing right. Another person said of the meeting that it was a glowing endorsement of the union. Another person said people saying he tried to buy votes, and a lot of people saying that's not getting their vote now. Too much crawfishing and lies, talking about the company. Another person said I still want those UAW cards. So there we go. That's the meeting and the reaction from the employees. Good reactions there, and appreciate the employee, the UAW worker organizer, sharing those with us. So there we go.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're going to continue the show in the second half of the show, where we're going to be going into overtime. We're talking to Katie Barrows from the Department for Professional Employees at the AFL-CIO about professional employee unionization. That's a topic close to our heart, obviously. as professional employees. We're also going to be talking about child labor and South Carolina's governor. We weren't able to get to those in the main show. We're going to get to those in the second half of the show. And we're going to be taking your calls, 844-899-TVLR, 844-899-8857. So we're going to go ahead and open those phones up and take your calls in the second half of the show. Just a reminder, labornotes.org, find stuff there, tvlr.fm/store, pre-order our hat, tvlr.fm/donate, give us money, and we'll get to some other plugs in the second half of the show. And if you're not going to follow us over there on Facebook and YouTube, we will see you next week. Okay. All right. After we're now off of the radio and we're off of WVNN now. We are going into the second half of the show where we are no longer online only. Actually, we still have the shackles of the FCC censors, but we have time to censor ourselves. Instead of having to censor ourselves live, we'll be able to censor it in post. So the second half of the show is now airing on WMMT, so we're really excited about that. We're going to go ahead and take a break, and we will be right back with the second half of the show, Overtime.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell. Go to Harlan County, there is no neutral there. You'll either be a union man or a thug party H-player. Which side are you on? 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 Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell. Which side are you on? 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 Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
All right, y'all. Thanks for joining. Thanks for being here with us. I'm still here. Jacob is rejoining.
Yeah, sorry about that. It went faster than I expected it to. The break did. But yeah, folks, we're back. This is Overtime, second half of the program, where we are going to talk some more union stuff. Really looking forward to talking to Katie Barrows, Communications Director for the Department for Professional Employees of the AFL-CIO. Looking forward to that conversation. What do you say first we talk about South Carolina's governor? How does that sound?
Sure.
Yeah.
Start off with a bang.
Yeah, the child labor stuff. We've got a few different stories that we can talk about there. Including some good news out of Minnesota from the UFCW that I'm excited to share with you. So we'll start with this since it's kind of an isolated story. Okay, so South Carolina governor. Just a reminder, just to kind of bring you back up to speed, because it's kind of a it can be a situation where it's really difficult to follow what's going on. So there's a new port in South Carolina that's been built, the Letwin Terminal, and the International Longshoremen Association has a contract with a big carriers association, an association of companies that come into the port and use it to ship goods, right? So they've got this contract, and within the contract it says that at any new ports, all of the labor would be done by ILA members. Okay, so that seems to me to be a pretty clear contract language. Any new work is going to be done by ILA members. And so in South Carolina, just some geographical context for South Carolina, there is a tradition of a hybrid model on the ports where ILA members do some of the work and South Carolina state government employees do some of the work. And the South Carolina state government employees, as you can imagine, are less well paid and do not have a union. So, but nevertheless, the contract doesn't address that, right? The contract does not address existing ports or terminals. And so the status quo remains, right? That's been those ports where there's a hybrid work model has been grandfathered in. The ILA is not attempting to do anything about that at this point. But this Letwin terminal is new. Right. And so the ILA is saying, these carriers, they have to follow our contract. And the carriers attempted to not follow the contract. The carriers attempt to utilize the Letwin terminal, despite the fact that South Carolina is intending to continue to use this hybrid model at this new port. And so therefore, taking jobs from ILA members, jobs that had been negotiated for and jobs that had been guaranteed to them in this contract with the carriers. And so the ILA sued the carriers. The ILA has not sued South Carolina or any of their departments. The ILA sued the carriers for breach of contract, for not enforcing the contract. And South Carolina has sued the ILA, saying that this is a secondary boycott because this boycott is an attempt to, direct South Carolina's employment practices rather than the carriers. And, there's a certain argument there where by virtue of the contract, the carriers would encourage South Carolina to not hire these people and to allow the ILA to do everything. But ultimately, there is no pressure on the South Carolina government by the ILA. All that the ILA is saying is like, look, the carriers, if you can't follow our contract at this new port, then you can't use this new port. And so the ILA is suing the carriers for $300 million. South Carolina is really upset about this. They really don't like, the law. They really don't like following they really don't like following the law or law and order or anything like that when it benefits working people. And so they're trying to get this contract language that the carriers agreed to overturned at the Supreme Court. And so that's where the situation is right now. The Supreme Court has taken up the case, and that is not good. The Supreme Court is bad. And so there you go. That's the situation reminder. And here is a small clip of what McMaster said in his latest State of the State address.
It seems that no business or employee in South Carolina is safe from the disingenuous campaigns and destructive impacts of union infiltration. No one should bargain their prosperity under threats of union boycotts or coercive pressure campaigns. We will not let our state's economy suffer or become collateral damage as labor unions seek to consume new jobs and conscript new dues-paying members. And we will not allow the Biden administration's vigorous pro-union policies to chip away at South Carolina's sovereign interests. We will fight. Ladies and gentlemen, we will fight all the way to the gates of hell, and we will win this battle. Thank you.
So there we go. Very invested in the idea of making sure that workers in South Carolina have less money, less benefits, and fewer protections. Very invested in that, willing to fight to the gates of hell for that idea. And so obviously the ILA and other unions in South Carolina not happy with this. They responded immediately with a rally the same night, and they had another bigger rally by unions at the Capitol. At this rally, the Union of Southern Service Workers were present, and they announced the results of a poll that they had commissioned that showed that 66% of South Carolinians approve of unions, 81% of black voters in South Carolina approve of unions, 73% of Gen Z, 87% of voters of color, 93% of South Carolina voters approve of workers coming together to fight for better conditions, right? So when you take away, do you approve of unions? That already has a very high approval rating among South Carolinians. But when you take away the union, the word union, and you just describe what it does, because people have been negatively polarized against unions for whatever reason. Because the elite and the bosses and all of this, they have media and they pay for media that disparages unions and purposely attempts to negatively polarize workers against unions. And so when you take away that aspect of negative polarization and you just ask them about ask them about what unions do, even more overwhelmingly, South Carolinians approve of this. 93% of South Carolinians approve of workers coming together to fight for better conditions. 75% of South Carolinians want a higher minimum wage. So really good poll there. Appreciate the Union of Southern Service Workers commissioning that and making the results public.
They're doing good work. And also,
yes.
Interestingly enough, I don't think that can be chalked up to infiltration. I just don't think that came from infiltration, but I don't know.
Yes. Yep. No, it's absolutely not. And we're gonna play a clip from the Union of Southern Service Workers here in just a second. But the ILA last week had another response, a video response from the International President Harold Daggett, and so I wanted to play a bit of that. Let's play this from Daggett.
ILA members in the Port of Charleston are among the best compensated workers in the state of South Carolina. And that burns the hell out of the governor. He sits in his all-white private country club, surrounded by his cronies, saying he'll go to the gates of hell to keep unions out. Well, let me tell you, he's gonna go to hell. ILA members in the Port of Charleston are among the best compensated workers in the state of South Carolina.
That's It's looping now. Okay, yeah. So, so good response, good energy. Enjoyed listening to that clip. You can find the full clip on their YouTube channel, ILA Union. And the Union of Southern Service Workers also put out a video where I think we can say friend of the show. I've been on a panel with her, Naomi Harris. Reacted, did one of those YouTube reaction videos to the governor's State of the State address, where she watched and listened to it and reacted to it. Here is a clip from that video from the Union of Southern Service Workers and Naomi Harris.
We are a right-to-work state. We have the lowest union membership in the country. We have worked hard and carefully through education, training, and business recruitment to earn our record prosperity.
They ain't earn nothing. The only people who earn something is the working class. They took it from the working class. They haven't earned nothing. If it was not for people that work at McDonald's, working as a caregiver, being nurses, if all of us that are essential workers just stop doing our job, the whole South will.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. So really appreciated the Union of Southern Service Workers, the ILA, all of the work that they're doing to fight against South Carolina Governor McMaster. We will continue to keep an eye on this story and let you know what happens. But for now, I believe we have Katie Barrows in the Zoom. Is that right?
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
So
I thought we were a little bit behind. Turns out we were right on schedule.
we are right on schedule. Katie Barrows is the communication director for the Department for Professional Employees, AFL-CIO. Katie, welcome to the program.
Hi, yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on to talk more about unions of professionals.
We're very excited about that, as both of us are at this point, quote unquote professional union employees, right? We both have white collar jobs. Adam also has a blue collar job where he's a member of the Stagehands Union, but his nonprofit that he works for, Alabama Arise, recently unionized with CWA Local 3908. So we're very excited about that. And so I guess we can start with, and then I'm a federal employee. I got, one of them clickety-clack jobs in the office as well. So let's just start with the premise of the thing, right? Professional employees. People always tell me I don't need a union because I have a clickety-clack job, and that means that everything's great and I have a perfect job and I have no need of a union because everything's great. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that all working people, including professionals, need a union. That's correct. That most folks think when they think of unions, they don't think of professionals. They think of factory workers or grocery store employees or, folks on the assembly line. But professionals have a lot of the same concerns as other working people. They want to be fairly compensated. They want a voice in their workplace. And so most folks are surprised when they hear that professionals make up about 45% of the labor movement. There's around 6.4 million professionals in unions, and this includes engineers at Boeing, attorneys at the ACLU, architects at firms in New York, inspectors at the FAA, reporters at digital media outlets, and many others. So it's, unions are available for professionals. Like professionals are eligible under the National Labor Relations Act and other state legislation for public sector employees to join and form unions. And more and more professionals are taking advantage of that as they, see their compensation not keeping up with their expenses and the return on their labor that they give their companies. And so this is something we're trying to spread the word about at DPE. And for those who are unfamiliar with DPE, we're a trade organization of the AFL-CIO. We're the Department for Professional Employees. And we work with around 24 national unions that represent nearly 4 million professionals across the workforce. And so this means we work with folks in healthcare, education, engineering, legal services, the performing arts, and many other fields. And, we support our affiliated unions with research, legislative advocacy, organizing support, communications, you name it. And DPE helps unions support their professional union members and organize more professionals.
And so what are some of the issues that professional employees might face in the workplace that they would benefit from unionization?
I mean, the biggest one is pay. Like, I think almost all workers' pay is like the number one reason or number one thing they would like to see improved in the workplace. DPE, we do a regular survey of non-union professionals, and our last one was in 2022, and we did one in 2017. And for both years, pay was the most important workplace issue, the thing that they want to see improved with the union. And we know that unions are effective at increasing pay. Union members make about 19% more than non-union employees. And then specifically in contracts, we've seen huge increases in pay recently, from adjunct faculty to nonprofit employees to digital journalists. For example, adjunct faculty at the New Jersey Institute of Technology secured a 32% increase in minimum pay in the first year of their most recent contract.
Wow.
And then, a 44% increase over the 4-year lifetime of the contract. We saw folks at the Union just ratified a new contract that raised their pay by 3% in each year of the contract, but also a $10,000 increase in minimum starting salaries. And I've worked personally with nonprofits. That's a campaign DPE ran, and in the first year of many contracts, they've seen $10,000 increases to minimum pay. And then, subsequent guaranteed raises for the lifetime of the contract. So that's something that, like, pay is the most important thing that we've, heard from professionals on. And it's something that unions, have a track record of improving. The other benefits are another thing that are concern the professionals, parental leave, health insurance, and retirement contributions. And we've seen that, union members tend to have better health insurance plans with more employer contributions and retirement plans. Some interesting things we've seen professionals negotiate for are student loan repayment stipends. Nonprofit employees at every Texan secured that, a monthly stipend of up to $200 per month towards student loan repayment for folks in their bargaining unit. As I mentioned, parental leave is really important. Folks are negotiating for like 12 to 16 weeks of paid parental leave, so they can stay home with a new child, and then also have the ability to take care of family members. And then we've also seen outsourcing in a number of sectors has been a big issue for professionals, especially when you can outsource, like IT jobs to other countries and, get it cheaper. But folks at Google contract workers who organized in Pittsburgh at HCL America, they actually negotiated to keep a certain number of jobs in the United States. So that was part of the union contract. And then professionals have been kind of at the forefront of negotiating for DEI provisions in their union contracts. So they've tried to increase diversity at their organizations through negotiating for a percentage or how many candidates that have to be interviewed and make it to certain points in the hiring process, and that they have to be from underrepresented groups in that field. A number of them have negotiated in their contracts that have diversity committees, and also to have money that goes along with those diversity committees, so they actually are effective. And then things like pay equity reviews and adjustments. So looking at the salaries of everybody in the bargaining unit and seeing if there's disparities within job classifications or job titles with regard to people of different races and ethnicities and gender, and then making sure that there are salary adjustments to address those disparities. And we also know that, unions do improve the working conditions and the pay for professionals of color. For example, Black workers and Latino workers earn 26.7% more, and Latino workers earn 35% more as union members compared to their non-union counterparts. So these are all kind of pay, benefits, working conditions, and DEI initiatives. These are all things that are really of concern to professionals, and then this is something they've been able to address for their unions.
And it really is, that simple. Just the fact that, workers, whether you work at a computer and your labor is done primarily, with your brain or whatever, or you work in a factory and your labor is more manual and physical, obviously the problems are unique in that, obviously, right? It's not the same thing to be in a factory as it is to work in an office, but the problems are the same in that, you both typically are going to want to be paid more. You both typically are going to want to make sure that you have, protections around work-life balance and healthcare and time and being able to retire with dignity. And they are both similar in the fact that you want more control over your life, over the place where you spend the majority of your waking life, right? That statement is going to be true if you're a full-time working adult in the United States of America. No matter where you work, you spend the majority of your waking life at work. And so, you should have some amount of say, some amount of control, a voice in what that company does and what it does to you. And the only way that you're able to get that is through unionization, right? If you're not unionized, if you don't have a union contract, you don't have a process for collective bargaining, all of these things can be given or taken away completely at a whim. I mean, Adam, the reason that y'all unionized actually was primarily, of course, there are some things that you want to make better, but it was a big part of it was that, you feel like your jobs are pretty good and you want to make sure that things stay that way no matter what happens to management down the line.
That's exactly right. And maybe you can talk a little bit about that as well, Katie, because, this was our union campaign was not one where people were like upset and angry or fired up, right? It wasn't that kind of situation. And people think a lot of times, just like people have these misconceptions about, are unions appropriate for white collar office work? People also, assume that, a union drive is only going to happen when people are hitting rock bottom, when people are really upset and mad at the workplace. But in fact, sometimes that's the best time to unionize, when you do have a good management, you do have things that are going well, because you have a solid foundation, right? And you know what you want to start with, which is what you have, and build from there. And you want to protect that and lock it in. Because, and we've made this point before, management can change. People retire, people get sick, people change personally due to experiences that they have. Companies get bought out. I have a good friend who worked in a professional type situation, office structure, was a pretty good situation until the company got bought. And all of a sudden, people were being laid off, people's job titles were being changed, people were getting new titles with more responsibilities for less pay, right? All these sorts of restructuring issues that can happen in a professional workplace. And so, I didn't have a question there, but I did want to definitely reiterate that point, Jacob, that, you know, a union is good for you as a worker, even if you're happy where you're at, even if things are going well, even if you like your boss. In fact, maybe that's the best time to unionize, because hopefully you'll see that your boss will continue to be nice and will work in good faith with you, right? Of course, we know from just looking around at union drives across the country that it's easy to talk a good talk, but once the workers themselves start organizing, sometimes these progressive mission statements and very lovely bosses take a turn, right? And the power dynamics start to be revealed a little bit, you know, more. And so, yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up, Jacob.
Well, and I just want to chime in and reiterate what you said. We've seen a lot of, especially off the top of my head, I think of nonprofit employees that organize when things are fairly good. They're like, we like where we work, and we do feel like our management is fair, but leads of nonprofit organizations, they change a lot of times frequently, or somebody retires, and so it's good to have that locked, their benefits and working conditions and pay locked into a union contract. And you never know when things are gonna, if the economy's bad, finance is gonna take a turn. It's good to have, just provisions that make sure that you get a fair return on what you've given to an organization. So I definitely have seen folks take steps to unionize, even though things are fairly good at the moment.
Right. And some of it is, like you alluded to, preparing for when things aren't so good, whether that's internally or externally, right? Because of a nonprofit, if you're relying on grants, what happens when some of the grants dry up, if they dry up? What happens if funders change? Those things can happen in the nonprofit sector. Of course, we know in private industry, business environments change, and, some business leaders are more effective than others, right? And so that can change wildly, and having protections in place, such as a reduction in force provision, right, in your contract, if, stuff hits the fan financially for the organization or the company, how will that shake out for employees? Who will be chosen first to be laid off? How will the layoffs be administered? What kind of severance package will be offered? How long will people have health care after the layoff? All of these are questions that, like, we as workers deserve to have answers to and deserve to have input into. And like y'all said, doing a union about it, that's how you get that input.
Yeah, I mean, and we've seen, like, unfortunately, in digital journalism, things used to be really good, but, things have changed around media, and there's been a lot of layoffs and a bunch of change. But
just
fortunately,
recently,
a lot of them,
right?
yeah,
just the last few days, right?
Correct, yeah. But fortunately, a lot of them have organized unions. And so, even though there's going to be layoffs and people are going to lose their livelihood, at least a lot of them have bargained for good provisions around layoffs and severance packages that will give folks, at least some kind of cushion to land on their feet when they're looking for another job. So,
and presumably recall rights, right? I mean, that's something that I know of in manufacturing agreements. There's typically recall and or transfer rights if other jobs become available.
Yeah, I don't know the specifics on that, but I would think that a lot of them are modeled after other contracts and have some of that stuff. But I definitely know there's a lot of language around severance and around letting folks know as soon as possible when things are not doing well at an organization. So
right. So what are I have actually, in some instances, reached out to a union about a professional campaign in the area with the tip. People interested in, and something close to a nascent organizing committee, and been told that they don't have capacity right now. Is there any union in particular that is really on the move, and they have capacity, and they're wanting to take new campaigns that you're aware of in your department?
I mean, I think there are a number of unions. I would say that it really depends on like the location, the type of professional employee, and the size, all of that of the unit. I think all of those are factors, and that that will determine whether the union and the structure of the union. Like if it's mostly a local driven union, that really will depend on the local, and so that's definitely more localized, right? And so if folks reach out to us, we're at our organized email is organize@dpeaflcio.org. And if they reach out to us, we will help. We will do the legwork of finding the best affiliated union with us that can, help with their organizing campaign. So we're here to to find the best fit and a union that will have capacity and will be able to guide them for the union organizing process. So that's something we've done. We get leads, very frequently, and we're able to match folks with affiliated unions and help them, exercise their workplace rights.
I think that is huge, and I'm really glad that you brought that up because that's something that I want to pass along to other workers, and I'm sure people listening, have taken note of that. That's really, really helpful because it can be intimidating, I think, sometimes for workers who are trying to organize, right? It's kind of a scary thing, especially in a place like Alabama. It can seem quite scary. It doesn't have to be, but it can often seem that way. And then you're trying to find okay, well, which union makes sense? Which one, is interested in working with us? Which one has capacity? And who do I talk to? Which title? Which person? So, I think it's a real resource what you're putting out there to provide some of that and help kind of connect people with the right folks. And on that note, I wanted to really lift up the resources that y'all have available. Are fantastic, just fantastic resources online, and lots of support that you can request is my understanding. But for example, there's a racial justice toolkit that talks all about some of the ways racial inequities, exist in our professional workplaces and how you can actually address that in the collective bargaining process. And I think, resources like that are just very, very helpful. And so, yeah, I want to encourage folks, especially those of you who would fall in this professional category, take some time, check out the Department for Professional Employees website. It is worth taking some time, dpeaflcio.org. Definitely take some time to do that and just poke around because you're going to find some stuff really relevant and hopefully very helpful.
And I would just chime in that something that I always have to remind myself of, and this is what we found in our most recent survey, the 2022 survey, and also in 2017, that most professionals do not know very much about unions. And so we want to make it as accessible to them as possible. So if they, find us, we want to help them as much as possible to learn more about the organizing process and to connect them with a union. But our big thing is trying to get the word out that professionals can form unions, and there's a lot of things that they can improve with a union, and other professionals have done this, and we have tons of examples of what they've managed to accomplish, and that's something that folks can use in first contracts. But we just want to educate folks and make sure that they know they can form a union, where to start. And really for us, we tell them the start is to email us at organize@dpeaflcio.org. And then we also, just really want to supporter affiliates as they represent and organize more professional members.
How big of a problem do you find it in these campaigns, or as you're having these conversations, or as you're helping workers have these conversations? How big of a problem do you find that the internalized ideas of professional employees is to a union campaign in a professional workplace? I know that obviously there's a big push from above, from the bosses and the employers, organizations and agencies to try to make professional employees feel that we're really special snowflakes and we don't need unions. We're just a totally different kind of worker, and we're too good for that, right? But I find that there are professional employees themselves who have that construction in their head of themselves, that they're so smart and special that they don't need a union, right? That they're, they can handle things individually for themselves, and as opposed to maybe there's that idea is maybe less entrenched in some other environments than in a white collar professional job. How big of an issue do you find that is?
I mean, I think it is a barrier. Like, I'll talk to folks and they think I have in most cases a college degree, like I can advocate for myself,
right?
But then you get to talking to them about their workplace and they start complaining about their pay, or that a lot of times I hear in healthcare about staffing, and this ranges from nurses to doctors. Like, there are doctors who have organized unions with the with AFT and the American Federation of Teachers Healthcare Division, and you start talking to them like, well, it sounds like even though you feel that you have more leverage, the boss really is not listening to you. And so the way that you get the boss to listen to you is with a legally protected right to negotiate with them. And you start, so once you start to have deeper conversations, folks tend to be like, oh yeah, like maybe I do need a union. And then the other thing I do is I point to, some really educated and smart folks who have been unionized for a long time. And that includes the aerospace engineers at Boeing, literal rocket scientists in a sense. And they've been organized, I think since like around the 40s or 50s, for a long time. And then, right, the rocket science at NASA are organized. Again, doctors are organized, and you start giving them examples of who else are union members, and you're kind of like, well, they see the value in a union, and they're highly educated folks, and they've had benefits, and then folks start to become more open to the idea. I've recently done kind of an interview series with folks who have formed unions in the last couple years. I've talked to some folks at an animation studio in New York, nurses in Vermont, librarians in Pittsburgh, and they've recently organized. So they've had to have conversations in the past, couple years, and they've kind of said, once we get down and talking to folks about the issues, they come around and they do see the value. And then they've also said one of the biggest benefits of having a union is kind of the collective, like the relationships that are built. Right. Like a lot of folks will talk about how before folks didn't really talk to each other, or people didn't know each other, and now they become close, and they are able to have regular conversations, which really creates more camaraderie in the workplace, and it's better for everyone.
Right. Yeah, no, that actually friend of the show is the president of the rocket scientists at NASA down the road here in Huntsville. So we're very very big fans of our rocket scientists union here in Huntsville. So
yeah, and I really want to lift up that point you just made about the relationships. That is so true. I mean, that is something that I experienced in this recent organizing campaign at the nonprofit. It really brought us together in a deeper way, and particularly those of us involved in the organizing drive, really got. I mean, because there was a lot of work, right? A lot of work in terms of tracking one-on-one conversations and debriefing with each other and strategizing, and through that really coming to lean on each other and really work as a team. It does build a level of camaraderie and a level of solidarity that is often missing in a lot of workplaces, but especially in professional workplaces often, because like y'all were talking about, we're talking often highly educated people, people whose jobs are often very individualized, right? Someone may sit down in front of their computer and be responsible to answer their own emails and write their own reports and things of that nature all day, and not necessarily in the team atmosphere. But collective organization is definitely the way forward for any working person. I really appreciate the work that you're doing to lift that out. And librarians, I hope will definitely pay attention. There's so many threats to libraries right now, particularly in states like Alabama, where we have book banners and we have people threatening to send librarians to jail. And I just want to pass on to any librarians listening. You need to organize, and organizing is the best way possible to protect yourself and your coworkers, and of course the community will be behind you, but organizing in the workplace is going to be part of that solution. And check out DPE for more resources on how to do that, which I love that, and I'll definitely be sharing that with folks.
There you go. The president of the Rocket Scientists Union actually said, dropped in the chat that the locals at NASA have been around since the post-Apollo reduction in force in the early 70s. So at least here in Huntsville. So there you go. There's the bit of trivia for today. Katie Barrows, is there anything else that you wanted to make sure you leave folks with before we let you go?
Well, I would just say, I mean, I'm sure you harp on this, being in Alabama, that folks often think that if they're in a right to work state, that they can't organize a union. And that's another thing that I commonly have conversations with folks. I'm like, no, you can still have a union. There's just, it comes down to, who pays during the contract and all of that jazz. But I think there is a misconception by many folks like, well, I'm in a right to work state, I can't organize. So you have the barrier to, professionals' knowledge about unions, and then you have the overall knowledge around right to work. But I would say, if you are a working person, professional or not, like, you generally have rights in the workplace, and you should think about exercising them. And especially with all that we've been through with the pandemic, inflation. But for professionals specifically, if you're interested in learning more, you should contact us at organize@dpeaflcio.org.
All right, Katie Barrows, Communication Director for the Department for Professional Employees, AFL-CIO. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you. Really enjoyed it. Yeah, and just wanted to point out, y'all, definitely do check that resource out. And something she said that I wanted to mention before we even transition to our next segment, which was folks who think it's illegal to organize in Alabama. We do run into that all the time.
Yeah.
I also run into it at the public sector. I had someone just this week tell me it's illegal for me to organize, right? They didn't. And it's not a knock on them at all, because that is a common conception that, people at colleges and universities and other public sector institutions like local governments, that they can't organize. Public libraries being another example, which in some cases are, private sector, nonprofit entities, and in some cases are public sector, local government entities. It gets really complicated and messy there. But there again, that's why I'm glad we had DPE on today to share that resource and let folks know that there are people you can reach out to for assistance. You don't have to, do everything from scratch and reinvent the wheel. There are other people who have organized. No matter what job you have, chances are someone has organized in that job somewhere, right?
Absolutely.
Somewhere in this country. And so, we just got to learn from each other, continue to share and lift each other up with this kind of stuff, and find leads where we can find them, because we have to grow the labor movement in every industry, in every kind of workplace. We have to grow. If we're not growing, we're dying, and we have been dying for 50 years. It seems like maybe we're, coming back from the death, thankfully, over the last couple of years. But we've got to grow in the white-collar sector, in the professional sector. So, y'all hit them up.
Let's talk about child labor. So there, there's child labor is really more of a topic of conversation today than it has been in a long time. And in fiscal year 2023, actually, Department of Labor investigators identified child labor violations in 955 cases and assessed employers with more than $8 million in penalties. I can't remember exactly what the number is as far as like how much it's rising. I think it's like 30, 40, 50, 60% year over year for the past few years. I mean, it's a growing problem. And there was recently, or about a year ago, there was created an interagency task force to combat child labor exploitation, to try to align federal efforts to combat this issue. We have seen children dying on the job. A 15-year-old in Alabama died on his first day on the job at an Alabama roofing company. There have been children face injuries, severe injuries, amputations in sawmills and slaughterhouses, and all sorts of, just all sorts of terrible, terrible things. And, the Republican reaction to all of this has been that, the problem here is that it's illegal, actually, that these children are working. We saw probably the most extreme example of this in Indiana, where a Republican lawmaker attempted to make it legal for 14-year-olds to go into the coal mines again. Literally, for 14-year-olds to work in coal mines. I mean, actually, unironically, no exaggeration, that was a bill that was actually filed by a Republican legislator in the year of year of our Lord 2023. Alabama is not exempt. We have a bill in the Alabama legislature right now that is we have two bills actually in the Alabama legislature dealing with child labor. One is better than the other. So let's hear from the not as good one. Here is the sponsor of the bill explaining why this is such an important bill that needs the attention of the legislature. This is a very serious issue, and they're really solving some problems here. Let's listen to this.
Yeah, this is an important bill, and the reason is it would get the government out of the way of allowing 14 and 15-year-olds to have the opportunity to work after school, etc., without permission of the government.
There you go. That's a really pressing issue, and it's great how he says government instead of schools, right? Because people obviously have a much better connotation with the word schools or superintendent or teacher or principal than they do with the government. The government, big, bad, scary, ooh, and so when you obfuscate it like that, they have to get permission from the government. Like what's going on there? You have to go to the comptroller or something. No, you go to a school official and you get permission from them. That's the status quo right now in Alabama. If you're 14 and 15 and you want to get a job, you have to have a sign off from, I think it's the school superintendent, and the school superintendent basically saying, yay, verily, little Johnny, he's doing well in school, and so, there's no reason why he can't go have a little part-time job working at the mall for 3 hours a day or something like that in alignment with other labor laws. And I don't have a problem with that, right? I mean, there's no reason to have an issue with, 14 and 15-year-olds doing some amount of wage work, as long as, very important, very, 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 very important caveats that, it's safe, that they only do it for a very limited amount of time during the school year. I think 3 hours a day and 18 hours a week right now is the limit. And that they have, protection against exploitation. I think one good thing for Alabama to do would be to force employers who hire minors to keep records of sexual assaults that happen on the job and provide those records to the parents before the parents give permission for their children to work at this job, right? So, that's something that I think we could see. That's something that Florida Democrats last year proposed and Florida Republicans denied. Rejected the idea that employers should provide information on sexual assaults to the parents of children who want to work in their facilities. But, on the principle of the thing, 14, 15-year-old going and doing some wage work, I'm not in principle opposed to it. I think that probably their time would be better spent doing, school-oriented extracurriculars like basketball or, doing some sort of sport or doing choir or, chess club or, just hanging out with friends or reading or doing, anything else. But, I do want to, give families and, parents some amount of freedom to, if they think that this is something that would be valuable for their child, and the child feels like it's valuable, then, look, I personally would not want to, get in the middle of that. But,
well, and let me also just say, well, you go ahead, finish your thought there.
Yeah, well,
but
the requirement that a superintendent sign off and say, if the child is in the public school system, right? Because if they're not in the public school system, then it's going to be the private school administrator, or it's going to be their parents if they're homeschooled, doing this similar sign off to say, yay, verily, little Johnny is doing well enough in school that he can work. That is a very important restriction, because if you have a child that is 14 years old and gets into the workforce and they are failing school, that means they are that much more likely to get caught in the, in the hamster wheel and never be able to get off and never be able to make anything more of their life, than, being consistently in low wage kind of dead end jobs. And the reason that we have publicly available universal education is to help people, make their lives better. And so if we allow children to just throw that away, while they're as young as 14, we are doing a detriment to them and to society. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And, I also just want to mention that for a lot of these 14 and 15-year-olds that are entering the workforce, it's by necessity.
Right.
It is due to the poverty in which they're living, whether their parents are poor or they don't have parents. It's no surprise that a lot of these child labor issues that we've seen over the recent years is immigrant children. Immigrant children who are some of the most desperate. And, I can tell you, having been a former educator and with a family of educators, it's typically not the middle class, affluent kids who are working these jobs or who are going into the workforce so young. Or if they are, it is kind of like what you mentioned. It's like a little fun job at the mall, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a lot of working class kids are working by necessity. Their checks are going towards the light bill. They are buying groceries for them and their younger siblings. It's not just like spending money for video games.
Right.
And it is in, more middle class areas a lot of times. They're getting a job to kind of learn responsibility, right? They don't have to rely on the parents for their little spending money. They can go out to the game or the movies or whatever. And so I do want to just highlight that there is a distinction. And there are real pressures, particularly in a place like Alabama where poverty is so widespread. There are pressures to put younger and younger kids into the workforce. And, so that's something that is a trend that we have to recognize. And, I think when you have a lot of poverty and you have a lot of families struggling with poverty, that's incentive to get as much, wages as you can. And so, unfortunately, that's incentive for 14 and 15-year-olds to be focusing on wage work as opposed to education and their future.
Right.
And, believe me, you talk to teachers of working class kids, and they will tell you how freaking tired these kids are. They come in sleeping during the school day because they're working all the time.
Right.
And they're, helping take care of the families and the younger siblings, and they are paying bills, and they have all these responsibilities that really, no child should have. But, due to the economic circumstances so many families are facing, particularly in Alabama.
And I do think that the next thing that I'm going to say is pretty intuitive, but I think it's worth mentioning. The implication of saying we need to get government out of the way is that there are situations in which a reasonable person believes a 14 or 15-year-old is competent and capable enough to have a job that the government is not allowing them to take.
Right. And
that's the implication. And
has that been proven?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Is there even anecdotes to that?
Are there any anecdotes in the entire state of Alabama? I would be shocked if there was even one where a child who was making A's or B's or really even C's and B's, who the superintendent denied their application to get a work authorization. That would be shocking to me if that happened. And I think that's intuitive to people. It would be strange to see that happen. And so I would be interested in any evidence of that happening. Of course, Senator Orr has not presented any such evidence. Neither has the Alabama Policy Institute, who is pushing this bill. Alabama Policy Institute, a Koch brothers funded think tank in Alabama. They've been pushing this bill or something like it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That's the origin behind this. They,
Yes.
Unveiled this as part of their legislative agenda before the session started.
Yeah. And so
also that framing of getting government out of the way, like, okay, I would love to go 90 miles per hour down the parkway.
Let's get government out of the way. Yeah.
Get government out of the way of that, right?
Right.
I mean, you can take that tack on every law, every regulation, every aspect of social restraint that we have.
Right.
Oh, it's the government getting in the way.
Right.
I mean, and obviously folks like Senator Orr are okay with the government getting in people's way in many, many respects of our lives.
Right.
And I'll just leave it at that for now.
So, so that's a pretty obvious concern to have with this is that there are going to be people who fall through the cracks. And so there's one person, and I think this is actually a Republican, and this person said that they're going to propose an amendment to this bill with replacing the authorization from the superintendent with authorization from the parent, like a written actual form from the parent for 14 and 15-year-olds saying that that they can work. But right now, if the law passed as is, if this bill passed as is, there would be no requirement for permission from the schools or the parents. A 14-year-old could go theoretically be failing school without the permission of their parents or the school or knowledge of any of these parties and go and get a job and further make their life worse.
Right. And let's just be real here that the same people who think a 14-year-old should be able to go get a job without any parental or school consent don't trust that 14-year-old to check out their own library books.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so let's play this clip.
Okay?
Yeah.
Is there something in place to make sure that if the student's grade point average or their work in school is going south?
I would say that's certainly a parental jurisdiction that the parents, if Johnny wants to go work at McDonald's after school, the grades start slipping, then the parents would say, John, you know, your grades are slipping. You're going to have to quit your job, or your grades got to be a certain level before we're going to allow you to do that, and let the parent be a parent.
So are the parents giving them permission to work as well?
Well,
there's nothing in here that says.
No, well, I'm just talking about, you know, that'd be a family
I understand.
decision.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank
so
you.
there you go. Yeah, so he got caught there. You know, he's saying it. You know, the woman is asking, are there any things about the parents having permission, or like what restrictions are there? And he says, well, it would be a family issue, and she points out like, well, actually it wouldn't be a family issue. There's nothing in the bill requiring it to be a family issue. There's no requirement for it to be any sort of issue. This 14-year-old who's failing school can just willy-nilly go and get a job with no permission from anybody whatsoever as a 14-year-old. So he was caught on that, and he looked kind of silly, I think, in my view. Now, while there was no official Democratic opposition to this bill getting out of committee, it received a favorable report, 7-0. So there was no Democratic opposition. Somebody on Twitter said that they called the minority leader, Anthony Daniels, and said that the reason for this is because it was a voice vote. And I talked to somebody else, and they said, well, typically, you know, Democrats, just as a courtesy, they're not going to really stop a bill coming out of committee, you know, especially if it's going to pass anyway or whatever, just so that maybe some Democrat bills can get out on the floor and at least get voted on as well. Now, of course, the Republicans in this session have been is my understanding, running over the Democrats much more than in previous sessions. So I don't know why you would extend Republicans this courtesy, especially when we're talking about, you know, the health and safety and you know, the well-being and educational, you know, achievements of 14-year-olds. Why you would give, you know, Republicans the courtesy of being able to fast track this bill. It's kind of doesn't make sense to me, but there was a really eloquent expression of the concerns that would arise among any reasonable person on hearing this bill and what it would do. Let's listen to this.
I understand what you're trying to do. We're trying to increase workforce participation. Am I wrong on that?
I think that could be ancillary, but at 3 hours a day, you know, I don't know the aggregate impact. It's more, why should you go to the government and get permission, or the superintendent to be exact, to allow your child, if you work 3 hours after school at McDonald's, why should we have to do that?
Well, in my district, we have truancy issues of the Black Belt. And so my concern is the same as Senator Coleman Madison, is you get caught in this rat race and you start paying bills and eventually you drop out. And nationwide, I think this bill has come at a very inopportune time because nationwide we are seeing an increase in child labor violations. And I think we all should be concerned about that and try to find other creative ways to increase workforce participation and not just with our children.
I mean, yeah.
Amen.
Really,
I appreciate
yeah.
him saying that.
Yes.
Because that to me is the context is important.
Mm-hmm.
The context is important that we've had just a rash of child labor violations that we started this segment mentioning. Some really scary, some really just disturbing child labor violations here in Alabama and across the country. But right here in Alabama, that's the context. And so you see that, you're aware of this news and you think, you know what? The problem is too many superintendents getting in the way of too many 14 and 15-year-olds working.
Right.
And, you know, Senator Orr kind of played down the workforce participation aspect to it, but the Alabama Policy Institute did not.
Right.
They explicitly talk about Alabama has a low labor participation rate. Alabama has a quote-unquote labor shortage. Yeah. Of course, we know that is a shortage of paying people a living wage. You know, the industries they name is, you know, fast food, service industry jobs where typically they are paying at or near minimum wage, or in some cases below minimum wage through a tipped wage, right? And so those are some of the industries that are struggling to recruit people. And, you know, the Alabama Policy Institute is pretty explicit that, you know, they want more children in the workforce as a way to address this quote unquote labor shortage, which, you know, is also another way of saying a tight labor market. And that is what it looks like to me, that, you know, slowly but surely you're going to chip away and chip away and chip away at these regulations, so that we look around and suddenly there's more children in the workforce, and the children that are already working, it's being legalized, right? Because there's a lot of children already working under the table or in violation of these laws. Because I can tell you also, having been a former educator and know educators, many of those educators know from the kids that those laws are being broken. They're being held at work later into the night than they're supposed to. Some of them are going into work before they come to school, which they're not supposed to. All these different things are happening already. So the idea that we need to cut regulations is the exact opposite of where we need to go. And I know, you know, folks may be listening and think, well, you know, this bill isn't that big of a deal. And I guess in a practical impact, do I think there's going to be, you know, because I don't think the government is actually getting in the way of this happening. I don't think it's solving like a real phenomenon necessarily with like what it's really talking about of getting the government out of the way. I don't think government is in the way of just like a flood of 14 and 15-year-olds, but there will be some who should have been caught by the system because they're truant, because they're failing out of school. And, you know, if they had come to the school system and needed the school system to sign off, it could have been that opportunity for an intervention.
Exactly.
That could have been the time you bring in the counselor, you bring in the social worker, the problem-solving team, whatever the situation is, of course, assuming you have much of this in place. But you have that intervention to say, all right, why do you want to work? Okay, let's figure that out. It could be economic necessity. It could be that the lights are off at the house, and that's part of why they're missing school, right? And so there's just the idea that you don't want that kind of involvement with 14 and 15-year-olds who are not able to go drive independently, and you don't trust them to go get a library book. It's just it baffles my mind. And I see it as a return.
Right.
We are seeing a decline and a return to previous eras of labor standards where it's normalizing child labor, normalizing convict leased labor. Like, you know, we're supposed to accept this return of things that we thought we had resolved a long time ago.
And he tries to stress the fact that this is all it does. It doesn't change the fact that, you know, children are not allowed to work during school hours, that they can't work in construction or mining, that they can't work over, you know, 18 hours total in a week, 3 hours in a school day.
It's like, y'all want to change that too.
It doesn't, right. Yeah, well, not this session, Adam, not this session. All this is doing is that, I mean, that's really the undercurrent, is that not this session there, but ultimately, you know, there's going to be a bill like that in Alabama. I'm almost sure of it. But he's really stressing that, look, this doesn't change any of the other child labor laws in the state. But actually, though, and of course he has to know this. He has to know this, that it would make it easier for those situations to arise. Right? I mean,
one less check and balance.
Right. One less thing in the way of something like this happening because, you know, maybe let's say, you know, like the 15-year-old who was working for a construction company died first day on the job. Okay. I have no idea if he actually got authorization from the school, but if he did, that's something that maybe the school could have said, you know, even though you could technically work for a roofing company and, you know, do stuff like on the ground, you know, they might keep a closer eye on this kid or this company, or actually have a conversation with the company, or, you know, like Adam said, it's just one less thing standing in the way of, you know, children being abused and children being exploited by, you know, capitalists.
And this not forget about that children are more likely to be exploited on the job and to be harassed and assaulted on the job, to be cheated out of wages. They're less likely to organize a union, right? And that's also part of the subtext to this, because there's a tight labor market. There's more workers organizing than in the past. More workers feel comfortable quitting in mass and finding other employment, right? And so that's part of the subtext to this. But yeah, it's dangerous to go to work in Alabama. It's dangerous to go to work in the United States. Compared to other countries, it's more dangerous to work in Alabama compared to other states in the U.S. It's no joke to send kids out into the workforce and to be exposed to all sorts of different things and all sorts of different threats. And yeah, one less check and balance on that.
There is a good child labor bill in the Alabama legislature, though, right?
There is, yeah. So SB 119, Senate Bill 119. And ironically enough, one of the co-sponsors is Senator Arthur Orr.
Yeah, contains multitudes, this fella.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, he's got a real grab bag of legislation this year. He's got some good bills, and this is one of them. He's also got some of the worst bills in the session.
Well,
right?
I mean, the best bills and the worst bills in the session are both his, right? I mean...
Certainly on the child labor issue, right? Yeah. He's covering both angles of it. Yeah, so he is not, of course, the only co-sponsor. Senator Stewart, Coleman Madison, Beasley, Hatcher, Smitherman, and Singleton. So it is a bipartisan piece of legislation, Senate Bill 119. And what this would do is increase the civil and criminal penalties for an employer who violates child labor laws. Right? And, you know, I am not a big proponent of our criminal justice system. Typically am not in favor of increasing penalties on people. But when it comes to employers, that's, first of all, yes. More punishment. Whatever punishment, more punishment for employers, yes. And when it comes to violating child labor laws, yes. I'm in favor of more punishment for for employers that are violating that. So it would increase the penalties. Just to give you an example, like the first one listed, it changes from the department may to the department shall. And instead of $300 is $1,000. There's another one that goes from $1,000 to $5,000, a range of $5,000 to $10,000 actually. And so there are tougher criminal penalties as well that are mentioned in the bill. And so I think that's important. It goes from, let's see, in addition to civil penalties provided for in the previous subsection, employer who's found in violation of this section involving serious physical injury to or death of a minor may be deemed guilty of a Class B felony or Class C felony. That's opposed to, they have marked out Class A misdemeanor, right? So no more misdemeanor, it's going straight to felony in that situation. And so I think that, you know, it's important that we hold people accountable to law and order, right? Isn't that what we're supposed to do in Alabama, law and order? And so the bosses deserve to have legal consequences. Working people have legal consequences. We have one of the highest incarceration rates on planet Earth.
Right.
And so I think it's a wise idea to increase civil and criminal penalties for employers violating child labor laws. And I hope that it discourages folks from violating these laws, and I hope it protects children. Because after all, I've been told that Alabama's politicians are big fans of children. They define children in a very interesting way, to include frozen embryos, apparently. But yes, SB 119, positive piece of legislation. Really appreciate the folks putting that forward. And yeah, Senator Orr, I'm going to beat you up on the child labor issue. on one side of it.
Right. And then I'm gonna
but
come
then
back
the
and
other
say
side
thank
of
you
it,
on the other side. Yeah, he's a very strange fellow. We actually have scheduled with him an interview on Monday. So we're going to be asking him about this, and y'all will be able to hear it on the next program.
yeah, if you got
Lord
questions,
willing.
things that come to mind, let us know.
Yeah. We do have more good news on the child labor front, actually, amid all of the bad news. This coming out of Minnesota, where the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, UFCW Local 663, and this reporting is coming out of Workday Magazine, friends of the show over
right.
Workday Magazine. The editor-in-chief over there is Sarah Lazare, formerly of In These Times, friend of the show, good writer. This piece is from Amy Stager. Amy Stager. This union wants meatpacking companies to foot the bill for child labor prevention. So there we go. That kind of gives you an idea of what's going on. UFCW Local 663, which represents over 5,000 essential meat packers across Minnesota, including at Tony Downs Foods, is demanding the establishment of a child well-being fund. The employer would contribute 10 cents per each regular hour up to $50,000 to go towards alleviating working conditions that violate child labor laws, like the long hours that children have been found working into the night, and providing opportunities that would benefit the community, like summer internships. So this is a really exciting, an innovative way for that this union is fighting back against, the scourge of child labor across this country, and really taking the issue into their own hands instead of waiting for the legislature to try to propose a fix. And this is exactly the kind of thing that unions are uniquely able to do, uniquely able to confront conditions as they arise much more quickly than any other institution in American society.
Should be
yes.
Because fighting child labor is one of the historic missions of our movement, and it should continue to be as long as this scourge continues.
Absolutely. The union says, going back to the piece, the union says they are not aware of any other labor contract proposals like this seeking to address and prevent child labor violations, although violations have been increasing across the United States. Reporting in the New York Times on migrant child labor spurred initiatives and investigations from government agencies tasked with enforcement. Photos of children in Minnesota working in hazardous positions for meatpacking companies and news of children dying in the roofing and poultry industries are just some of the stories making headlines as lawmakers have attempted rollbacks of child labor protections in state legislatures. In 2023, an investigation by the Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry found that Tony Downs Food violated child labor laws. Tony Downs Food has denied they violated the law, but agreed to pay a $300,000 fine, which is obviously what you do when you're innocent. That's just totally typical innocent behavior there, paying over $250,000 fine, and agreeing to a 3-year compliance period. An investigation by the U.S. Department of Labor found that Wisconsin-based Packers Sanitation Services use child labor across 13 states, 3 of which are in Minnesota, including the unionized JBS plant in Worthington, Minnesota. Another federal investigation in 2023 also found that Tennessee-based Monogram Foods violated child labor laws at a plant in Chandler, Minnesota. And so these are the things that, this union is seeing crop up all around them, and is making them, say, like, okay, obviously the legislatures across the country are going in exactly the opposite direction. We have more children working than ever, and more children working in dangerous positions than ever, and they're trying to make that easier for employers to do. That's not something that we are willing to accept, and so we want to try to put a stop to it. Stager talked to an employee there, a member of the union, Edgar, who only used his first name, talking about the last injury that he suffered was at the High Life pork processing plant in Windham, Minnesota, which closed last year. It made him unable to work without pain. Quote, "I can't even carry my kids again without it causing a pain in my back," says Edgar, a leader with Unidos, Minnesota, who spoke during a press conference. Meat processing plants are not safe places for our children and adolescents, not only because of the risks that this entails, but also because it interrupts healthy physical and psychological development and health in general. And so about the proposal, is it enough to restore all the harm? No, says Wong of the UFCW Local 663. But is it a start? Yes, it is a start to a solution, and that is who and what we want to be as Minnesotans. Creating everyday solutions to protect children, to protect workers, and make sure that they don't have to be in this false choice of going to work or going to school and trying to live this American dream in Minnesota. So really great stuff there from UFCW Local 663. Really appreciate their work.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is that's going to be it for us today. I think, Adam, you had some plugs you wanted to make sure that we got to before the show ended.
Yeah, let me check those out because there are quite a few events coming up here in Alabama and online as well. labornotes.org/events. Check that out. They have a lot of great trainings, and also you are running out of time to register for the Labor Notes Conference on the early bird registration cost. That runs out, I believe, the end of February. If you have not booked your registration for Labor Notes Conference in April, highly recommend that. Hope to see a lot of y'all there in Chicago. If you can't attend, stay tuned. There's a good event happening in Alabama around the same time. But also wanted to lift up our indoor air care advocates. Our friends over there put out a new video on their YouTube channel. And also they're encouraging folks to go to iaqadvocates.org/demand-clean-air to learn more about why we need clean air and how you can help. Appreciate all the work they're doing, fighting for safer workplaces, safer schools. Next weekend's going to be a busy weekend for me and for a lot of folks in Alabama. We have the Poor People's Campaign is holding a national day of action next Saturday, and they will be gathering in state capitals in over 30 states, including Montgomery here in Alabama. So that will be Saturday, midday down in Montgomery. Just Google Alabama Poor People's Campaign to find out more. And I'll be speaking at that event briefly about Medicaid expansion. And then the very next day in Selma, in conjunction with the, I believe, 59th anniversary Selma Jubilee, there will be a youth rally and march put on by the League of Women Voters, NAACP, and a lot of other organizations. Supposed to be, hundreds of folks, including a lot of students there. And I'm really appreciative I'll get the opportunity to talk about organizing in front of those folks. So, definitely dig that. If you're in the area, Selma, Montgomery next weekend, swing on by. I'll be wearing my CWA red for sure, so just look for the little white guy preaching the good word of solidarity. Southern Workers Assembly is hosting a virtual discussion called Operation Dixie, Lessons for Southern Workers on Thursday, February 29th at 6 p.m. Central. You can go to southernworker.org to register and learn more. Unfortunately, I have another speaking engagement that night, or I would totally attend that. I am trying to pass that word on to everybody I know. I think that is essential history for us to learn from and study. So, check out that webinar Thursday the 29th, 6 o'clock by the Southern Workers Assembly. Mentioned if you can't go to Labor Notes and you're in Alabama or you're in the South, there will be an AFL-CIO Organizing Institute April 17th through 19th in Birmingham. So I would love to see some folks, some local folks attend that. You're supposed to get your union to sponsor you.
Or your Central Labor Council.
Your Central Labor Council.
Your Central Labor Council can sponsor you.
That's right. That's right. And so would love to see some, Alabama activists get trained at this organizing institute. They hold these throughout the year, throughout the country, but I can't remember the last time there was one this close. So that's pretty cool. Check that out. Any union folks who just want to learn more about organizing, how to grow as a leader, how to make change in your workplace and in your community, good training for you. Let's see. Alabama Rise is hosting its annual legislative day on April 2nd. And we just dropped the registration info for that, I believe, yesterday. So you can go to alarise.org. You can find out more, but that's a great opportunity to lobby your legislators in person. We'll gather up folks, have a briefing, go to the legislative offices and go talk to the politicians, people like Senator Arthur Orr, ask him what he's doing about child labor. And, so it's a great opportunity for everyday people, working class folks, to get involved in the process. Would love to see some folks from North Alabama come down with me. Feel free to hit me up personally if you want more information, or like I said, go to Alabama Rise's website or social media. The very next day, April 3rd, is when the AFL-CIO is hosting its Roadkill Barbecue in Montgomery, and that's their version of the lobby day, basically, except in this case, it's more of a big barbecue where the politicians come to them. But there's another opportunity for union folks and working class folks to engage in the political process here in Alabama. It's a good networking opportunity, right? So I'd love to see some friendly faces there. Definitely holler at me if you're going to be down there. I will, and I look forward to seeing folks. And last thing is the Labor Spring. If you are on a college campus and you want to do any kind of pro-labor event connected to the campus, holler at us, and also Google Labor Spring 2024. It's a Georgetown University initiative. They offer a lot of support and resources for you to pull off one of these events, but I'd love to see one in Alabama.
That'll be it for us this week. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Pre-order your hats, tvlr.fm/store. Make a donation to the program, tvlr.fm/donate. Get your local to sponsor the show. Reach out to us for more details. We will see you next week.